Hello, GerleMen. Welcome to the show. I wanted to interview Dr. Frankie Bashan because of her authenticity, her dignity, and her courage to serve her community. She leads by example. As I told her in the episode, if I am reincarnated as a lesbian, I hope to be exactly like her. Dr. Frankie Bashan, or just Dr. Frankie, is a renowned relationship coach and dating expert. She is the founder of Little Gay Book, the most successful, exclusively lesbian and bisexual woman matchmaking agency in the United States. Dr. Frankie launched the Little Gay Book and quickly became the premier lesbian matchmaking service in San Francisco area, Los Angeles, New York, Boston, San Diego, Hawaii, Denver, and growing. She is now expanding the cities she serves and the client base she helps. In addition to her traditional lesbian and bi women client base, she is now helping everyone, regardless of sexual identity or orientation, find heart-centered connection. She is an optimist who feels that everyone deserves to love and be loved. Now, with 2 decades of experience in therapy and matchmaking, she appears as the resident expert on MTV's Are You the One?, the first reality dating series with a completely sexually fluid cast. Find Dr. Frankie on Instagram at Dr. Frankie Bashan, Facebook at Frankie Bashan or at Little Gay Book, on YouTube at Little Gay Book, or her website, just simply drfrankie.com. That's drfrankie.com, and you can find all of that in our show notes. Enjoy the show. The moment you realized you were a gay man, you were forced onto the path of the other. So you know oppression, inside and out. The calling of otherness has led you on your own hero's journey, and that journey has prepared you for greatness. You are a man answering the call to brotherhood, to conscious sex, and to heart-centered connection. Welcome home, brother. Dr. Frankie has been working for nearly 20 years on, specializing in the LGBT community with couples and individuals with relationship difficulties. And what I saw you saying that, you bring happiness to their lives by becoming a professional matchmaker. I just hinted that to my friend and editor who's a lesbian, and all of a sudden there's an avalanche of questions for you.
Good. I love that.
So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I do want to mention that it's April. It's Monday, April 13th. What is this, the third week of the pandemic? And, that just really shapes so many things, especially what we're going to talk about. But it doesn't feel authentic unless I just say, how are you? How are you doing with this?
I'm hanging in there. It's definitely tough. But I think I've created new routines, which help me, get through the day and feel productive. The biggest challenge for me is working out. Like I normally do high intensity workouts, and I can't access my gym, and I can't get access to heavy weights. And I can't drop the weights that I have at home on my floor. Otherwise I'll break my living room.
Yes.
So that's been really hard for me, the figuring out how to get my workouts to a high intensity. So, you improvise, you make the best of it.
Is there some of your routines you could share?
Sure. So I do Olympic lifting. I like to lift heavy weights, and I do CrossFit.
Well, it shows.
Thank you.
For your photos and stuff. Awesome.
Thank you. I am fighting aging. I want to be active, and I want to be able to do lots and stay healthy for a long time. And I hear that is the closest thing to the fountain of youth. So I'm buying into it full on.
Awesome. So let's talk into like how this all got started. And I noticed that you said you just left Kaiser, and I just have to give props to my I've been in therapy a long time. I'm a huge fan of therapy. I believe that it's getting us back to our naturalness. Like, I think that we grew up in tribes around the fire. We're used to having mentors, shaman, leaders. I mean, people that we could bounce things off of. I think that's a perfectly natural way to handle things cognitively. And our modern situation separates us from those people. And I always said that I hired mine. And but can you tell us how you got to where you are now and what Little Gay Book is about?
Sure. So I started at Kaiser as actually a resident. Like I was doing an internship there, and Kaiser's a great place to start because you see everybody. It's a generalist model. So I worked in clinical, the psychiatry department, adult and children, and I had exposure to every presentation, every type of mental illness, and you have a lot of support. There's a big team. And if you find that you're like when you're not at work, you don't have to worry about crises. They take care of it. So it's good when you're just beginning it's kind of, I describe it as like a boot camp. And I did that for around 7 years, and it's limited, right? Like I wasn't able to see my clients weekly. I was doing a lot of crisis management, and I had a lot of training in trauma work. So I was seeing clients who had PTSD and acute stress disorder mainly, which is intense, to mainly just be working with that population every day. And with Kaiser, the therapists there they're churning it out, right? They're seeing client after client after client with not a lot of breaks. And it just pulled on me. And I started to think a little bit outside of the box. Like I knew that I needed to think of somehow to transition because I was getting burnt out. I was getting vicarious traumatization, which is basically where the therapist starts to experience trauma symptoms.
Okay.
After hearing so many disturbing stories again and again, because part of the treatment for trauma is exposure work. So we would sit and hear the same traumas repeated again and again to help heal the patient. So I was like living and breathing them, right? You do your best to take care of yourself, but over time, it's like, you're if you're really in the work and you care, it gets in your cells. It just does.
I would think so.
Yeah. So, and I'm somebody who is in it. Like I love to help people. I love to connect with people, and I care immensely. And that's how you help heal people, is to really be in it, right? You can't act as if you're in it. You're either in it or you're not going to have a significant impact.
Well, that's what this whole podcast is about, is like heart-centered connection. And like you're describing that as being in it. You were in it. And so,
totally.
And so then you're taking on all that. I mean, you're experiencing their trauma through them.
Exactly. And I was fine for years. And then I started to feel like I couldn't stay present with them in the room, and I couldn't figure out why, because my heart was invested. It was because my mind was starting to shut down because it just couldn't tolerate it anymore. It was like I had been full. I got my fill, and I couldn't take it anymore. So I was brainstorming at the time with my partner, and we were trying to figure out what I could do to continue to do the kind of work that I do, but make it manageable and still enjoyable. And she had suggested to me, she said, well, why don't you do what you do as a hobby, make it a career? Because I had been doing matchmaking for fun. I'm very social, and I love to bring awesome people together. So I was doing matchmaking on the side as a hobby. And she said, why don't you give it a go? And I was like, that's such a good idea. I have the clinical experience. I love human behavior. I would be focusing on doing things that are like bringing happiness to people. There's less therapy can be pretty long term. So it like would be something that would happen sooner. So it didn't have to be so prolonged. And I thought the community also needs it. Like we were having a really hard time meeting quality women. Were coming to my office telling me I'm having a hard time meeting quality women. And I'm like thinking to myself, I wish I could introduce you to my client that I just had 3 hours ago. Right?
Yeah.
So I gave it a go. I did it in 2009.
Especially with that kind of empathy and intuition, that must have been just screaming in your head. Oh my God.
Screaming. And it's totally unethical. I couldn't do it because of confidentiality. I thought, all right, this is brilliant. So I put together a website, and I got my first client, and I started off with, a database of 10 of my friends, and basically pounded the pavement. So that's how Little Gay Book was born. And it was really hard in the beginning, but it's when you believe in it, talk about like being invested. I believed in it, and I was fighting for it, and I fought for it for years. And then finally the community got on board, and they were like, I understand, Frankie, what your whole plan was and what your intention is, and we back you.
What was that passion behind that? Why were you so motivated to do something, especially, I've listened to you tell your story on a couple other podcasts, and you said there might have even been a little pushback, and yet you still move forward. What was that spark inside of you? What needed to manifest?
Yeah, I just, when you know something, I knew that I could help people in this way. I happen to be working primarily with lesbians and bisexual women because it was a niche, but
Hmm.
I can work with anybody in
Yeah,
this way. And it was a pull that I couldn't ignore. And I knew that if I stuck with it and persisted, even though people were laughing in my face and they were totally poo-pooing what I was doing. And I think because there wasn't a frame of reference for it. We had dating apps and we had online dating sites, but there was nothing really out there about matchmaking. In the straight world, yes, or in the Jewish community, for sure, and in the Chinese culture, yes, but in our culture, not
yeah.
really. So they didn't really know what to do with me, and they would just kind of laugh at me. And I felt like there was nothing that could convince me not to keep pushing forward. And I listened to my gut a lot, and I talk about it in a lot of interviews.
Yeah.
My intuition and my gut, I've honed, like I listen to it and I definitely value it. It helps guide me. So that's why I stuck with it. I couldn't give it up no matter how much pushback I was getting.
Can you talk about that connection to your intuition, your connection to your gut? Because especially with men, I think, well, society in general is trained to like just talk about your plastic feelings, your facade, as opposed to being really in touch with your gut. Can you sum that up
Yes,
in
I
a
know
couple
it's hard.
phrases? Because I think that's so important, especially for queer people who are kind of afraid of following their gut, because that can get them shamed or arrested or different.
Yeah, and we don't trust ourselves. Like if things happen because of choices we've made that have injured us or harmed us in some way, then we start to really not listen to our gut. We don't trust it. We don't trust our intuition, or we question it. And for me, the way it's very abstract, so it's hard to articulate sometimes, but it's about getting really quiet and getting quiet kind of on a daily basis. I would say when I work out, there are points throughout my workout where I get really quiet
Mhm.
and I'm getting energized. There's lots of chemicals going through my body, adrenaline and endorphins, and I'm feeling really good. And at that time, I can stop. I sit down, I breathe, I deep breathe in between sets, and I just try to check in with myself. And it's a time for me to get quiet. So we got to get
Mm.
quiet. We're living in a really hectic, busy society, and our lifestyle it is not conducive to getting quiet unless you are intentional about it. And when you get quiet, you can hear your
Yeah.
internal voice giving you guidance, but you got to listen for it and you have to create space for it.
Yeah. I don't think a lot of people have even articulated there's the physical, the working out, the making your muscles stronger and whatnot, but there's that mental, spiritual thing in there too. And that'll lead us to our intuition. And I just recorded, so it'll come out this Friday I'm starting a Being a Man series. The first one is Feel Your Feelings. Because if you feel your feelings, that's where all your information is. That's where your wisdom is. That's where what you're talking about. Like, would you say that you're living in your genius now? Do you feel like this is where you want to be, that you love what you're doing?
I am definitely living in my genius. I like that. I like
Yeah.
to think of it that way. Yes. And I wasn't strategic about it really. I followed my gut and my heart. And if you listen, it will lead you there. And sure, are there barriers or obstacles that kind of present themselves that may give you pause and make you question if this is the right path? But if you're listening and your feeling is telling you it's right, it's right, it's right, and you can't come up with evidence, that's another thing. Is like, can you come up with evidence that doesn't support this feeling? Because sometimes our feelings give us the wrong information, right? Like
Yeah.
just because we feel something doesn't mean that it's actually 100% true. It
Mm.
might be based in fear that we're
Yes.
feeling that and it's trying to protect us. So this is why you've got to kind of sit with it and challenge it and really look at it closely to see, is it just something that's fear-based or is it real? Like, should you be pivoting and going in the opposite direction? So I am right where I should be. And I hope to continue to reach more people in my career. That's my goal. Now I'm kind of expanding what I do to reach a broader audience through television, and just not specifically working with lesbians and bisexual women anymore.
Yeah.
I work with everybody because people are people. I just happened to start, right? It was a niche. So it was a way for me to get in and just begin. And now it's really, I hope to keep growing.
That is awesome. I want to circle back to, you said the pushback, and do you think people are confused with the difference between dating and hooking up? I mean, because you were just you were saying that people there's apps out there and all this stuff, but that's, to me, I don't even know. Well, I haven't been officially single for a very long time. I haven't been on a date, so like a classic date, yeah.
Yes,
so
because it's kind of a shit show.
Okay.
It's a shit show right now.
I wish the look on your face. You believe that.
Oh, I do. Because it's really hard to ignore at this point. If all day long I'm hearing about the shit show on calls with clients, and I just see people spinning their wheels and struggling in their search to find a quality interaction, there's a lack of quality interactions. It's very superficial. And when you feel like you have just had a quality interaction, it's very elusive. All of a sudden that person disappears. You get ghosted, or they bench you, right? They put you on the side because they have 5 other people they're juggling. It's like we all have a serious case of like ADHD and addiction to the serotonin hit we're getting from swiping and matching with somebody. So it stays very superficial. It doesn't delve in any deeper than that. And it's very unsatisfying and keeping people in a place of isolation and loneliness.
Yeah, well, you've described what I was watching, but I'm really glad that I'm not into it. I read on the Psychology Today website that you said self-actualization is growth motivated rather than deficiency motivated. And in the terms that I work with, kind of with somebody that I'm doing work with right now, he talks about we're either going towards something, like going towards love, or going away from something, going away from trauma. And I thought that might be self-actualization is growth motivated rather than deficiency motivated. What do you mean by that?
A lot of our life experience has to do with perception, right? And the lens that we look through, right? The way we view ourselves, the way that we view others in the world. And one easy way to kind of think about it is think about somebody who has experienced a traumatic incident in their life. They could either look at themselves as a survivor or a victim. Right? Yeah. If you're a survivor, you've overcome, and you're leaning into the positivity and the growth and self-actualization, like thinking about how that traumatic experience can either define them or it help to shape them, but they're taking that and they're making it into something positive, right? Like I'll use an example for me. So I had a pretty difficult childhood, which I'm open about. I talk about it. My mom had bipolar disorder and really struggled. And she was also an alcoholic, although in her later years, she managed to maintain sobriety for a significant amount of time, which I know how hard that was for her. So it's just, so I want to just mention that. But I used my childhood experience and observation of the struggle and human condition to propel me to like think, how can this is not going to define me. I'm not going to repeat this cycle. Like I'm going to pay attention to alcohol, for example. I know that I'm predisposed to addiction, right? You take that information and you use it to help you make better choices. Do I drink? Sure. You're not going to see me pounding alcohol, right? Like just because I can probably get addicted. Basically, you want to think about how you can grow and take difficult experiences and use them to propel you and help you to be a better version of yourself. So every day I'm striving to be a better version of myself. We all know, right? We have facets or kind of carbonated parts of our personality that come from childhood, that come from trauma. And I'll say to my clients, like, yeah, sure, I'm not perfect. Like I've been schooled my whole life. I've been in therapy, right?
Yes.
But let me tell you, I am an imperfect being and I make mistakes. right? What do? We try to look at that. Don't ignore it. It's not going to go away. Look at it and grow from it and stretch yourself. And so that's what I'm touching on. Like I work from that viewpoint, or like the way that I think about work with my clients is very much through that lens of like self-growth and positivity, and how do we get to a place of self-actualization.
So like a big part of that is how I tell my story about myself.
Oh yes. The narrative, the story you create about history and about who you are today.
And I'm really big on this idea now that I've had a hero's journey. The classic story arc of you start in the normal place, you go someplace unusual, you go through troubles and tribulations, and then you come back to normal, but you're a different person. You've evolved. That's the classic hero's journey. But it could also be the victim's journey if you talked about it. You know, if all those trials and tribulations were still active, unresolved trauma. I think that queer people are forced on a hero's journey, like it or not. And that
absolutely,
if we can frame our story a particular way, we can actually see that we were forced into boot camp. We were forced to go through this learning experience that other people who are just part of the dominant culture aren't forced to go through.
Right.
Would you think that that's
it's true? And actually, it makes me think of Are You the One, the show that I was an expert on on MTV recently.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
So the reason why I'm bringing it up is because the cast, I don't want to say cast, whatever, the the awesome superstars that were on the show, 20 plus year olds. I think they were at ages, was it 21 to 28 year olds? And Goodness. So the house, there was so much depth to their character, to who they are as individuals, that it was harder than in previous seasons where they had all straight folks on the show, because so much juicy stuff going on in there that it was multi-layered and it had so much depth. And it's because they're sexually fluid, and they're out. And one person actually came out on the show, but she knew she was going to need to come out nationally on the show. But they have dealt with adversity because of their own challenges of being part of the LGBTQ community, right? And dealing with their own sexuality and gender identity and sexual orientation, that there was so much depth they were forced to. So it speaks to what you're touching on, that we are forced to kind of deal with shit early on.
And it's my judgment that it forces our minds to expand. As
it makes us more interesting, right? Like,
yes.
It's boring if you've lived this like perfect, serene life in a bubble. Like, where some of those rough edges makes us interesting. It gives us depth and capacity. And
yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. I want queer people to see that. A lot of people, I think, still, especially I live right in West Hollywood. Awesome. You're from the Bay Area. I know what you think of us.
I love it. Are you kidding? I'm so much fun there. I go for a weekend and I leave just dancing.
Yeah. I don't know. I like to poke that. It's like we're sister cities and we treat each other like siblings a lot.
Yes, it's true.
But it is true that we can get kind of hyper attached to the superficial here. And when we're attached to the hyper superficial, we don't see ourselves, the depth that we have, that we've come. We see that as those struggles as deficiencies that we don't want people to see, when in fact, that's some of our true goal. That's things you were just talking about.
Yes. Well, there's shame, right? We have shame. We try to hide it. But if you really flip that on its head, and instead of feeling shame about it and look at it and go, you know what, like this has forced me to look at myself, to reconsider how I want, what relationships are important to me, how I want to be seen in this life, how, you know what I mean? It just forces you to look at yourself more deeply, and it's all good stuff.
Yeah. I think that's the reason so many of us become teachers, psychologists. I notice even queer, I think the reason that people are touching into that is because we're not afraid to feel and have other people feel. We're gatekeepers to that scary place. I think because people intuitionally have an intuition about us that they know we've been to the scary space, so they trust us to lead them there.
Yes.
Okay, let me ask, what was this question I wanted to ask about? Well, with regard to dating and matchmaking, what do you think gay men and lesbians have in common, if anything?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard one. I've never had anybody ask me that. What do I think gay men and lesbians have in common?
If anything.
I think now more than ever, I think the lesbian community is more open to open relationships and polyamory. And you guys in your community, I'm totally generalizing, but you'll tell me if I'm wrong.
If it's to me, I can tell already. So
you have been practicing this open relationship concept and polyamory concept for years, way before we did. And it's something that I'm seeing more of in the lesbian community, and we're getting better at being more accepting of it and open to it. So I would say there's some overlap there.
Okay. In the poly. So this gets me into this other thing about specialization. You started specializing with LGBT community, most lesbians and bisexual women. It seems weird to compare this, but I was an active person in the fetish leather community here, and there's the LA Leather Coalition, which has everybody meets once a month. And every time the men had a party that was just for men, we would have women really push back. Oh, why are you having we're all into kink and whatever. And my point with that, especially, is that a special magic can happen when we're very specifically getting together and doing something. Like, it's very easy to see in a hypersexual situation, like a BDSM play party. But I also think that specialized places are also really important for building people's safety and self-esteem and well-being and strength when it comes to support groups. Like, I've been HIV positive since 1987. And it wasn't until like 5 years ago, 2008, 2009, before people ever thought about having, we had HIV positive discussion groups, but we didn't have HIV negative discussion groups. Mm-hmm. And once we had those, I was dating guys like that. Those were hugely edifying. But then people would attack, why are you having a specialized group for negative guys? Why are you having a specialized group play party just for men? Why is this, a women's only thing?
People don't want to be excluded. They have FOMO.
Yeah, I know they do. But I also have this PETS principle. This is me. Okay, I'm supposed to be interviewing you. But I think we have these 4 layers that we confuse our private space. We think that the rules in our living room should apply to all society.
Right.
And people forget that the rules in my living room can be radically different.
Exactly. Than the rules in my living room.
Yes. So I just want to say that what I think is specializing with women and bisexual women is a huge service to that community, because you know them and they know you, and there's a certain kind of trust there that they might not get from general society. And I would argue that general society is ready to trust you, because we just talked about that. We're the shaman. We're those people.
We're getting there, which is really exciting. And they're curious. General society is curious about how we do what we do. And I mean, we're all over television these days. I don't even watch TV. And recently with COVID-19, I've been watching it more. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many gay, queer characters.
Oh, everywhere now. Yeah.
Everywhere.
Because we are everywhere. But I just want to see, I know that it's difficult in a business model to stay in your niche, but can you talk about what are the positive things of serving a very specific community, and explain why that's not hurting the rest of the community, because you're providing a service that never existed before. Yes. And you're serving these people, but somehow people will come in and say, since I'm excluded, it hurts me.
Yes. And it's happening now more than actually ever before, because I'm getting now with how inclusive we're becoming in terms of, and the gender fluidity and all of that. There are people that are feeling excluded from my events because they're events for women. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. So I'm dealing with that at the next level, which Little Gay Book is trying to work through that and not offend people and help people feel safe and comfortable. But what it did when I started in 2009 is that it basically, I initially just focused on lesbians because that was the community that I was in and I had the most access to. And I'd already built up trust in that community because I was pretty involved in many ways in advocacy around that community. But I realized that bisexuals they were excluded, and they didn't have a place. They weren't feeling welcome amongst lesbians. They weren't feeling welcome necessarily amongst heterosexuals because they kept getting fetishized. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you know what, this is going to be disruptive to our community, but necessary to give them we need to start being inclusive and supporting one another and creating a safe space amongst queer women in general. So I feel like women in general in the queer community have always been really, once I got pretty established and they understood my mission and my purpose, showing me so much gratitude and appreciation because they feel seen, they feel accepted, they feel it's a safe space. Mm-hmm. And it repeatedly, it's not something that just came in and went out, right? It wasn't a fly-by-night situation. I've been here now going on 11 years, creating community across the country. So they feel a lot of love, and they're feeling like they're people too. They matter, that they're wanted, that they're desired, that people, just because you're bisexual, there are lesbians who would be very happy to date you. Mm-hmm. But for a long time, they didn't feel that.
Yeah, you gave them a space to feel that. And I know that. And I make up that those women they're edified and strengthened by that kind of thing. And then that exclusive kind of focus makes them better citizens when they go out into the world. Their interactions with a checkout clerk or an Uber driver or their employees might be leveled out once their core essence is being spoken to and seen.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a ripple effect.
Yeah.
And that is what keeps me here doing what I'm doing and giving me purpose every day. So if I leave a footprint, it's going to be the footprint of just empowering people to just be as authentic as possible and following their gut, right? Following that intuition and trying to do the right thing as much as they can for themselves and others. Yeah.
Awesome. I want to ask you 3 questions that I ask everybody on the show because I want the men and everybody else who listens to my show to focus on those 3 things. And then I want to get some questions from the women I know.
Awesome.
First of all, how do you invest in yourself? How do you invest in your own well-being, your own dignity?
I would say that I try on a daily basis to, one, figure out how I can continue to grow and stretch myself. So I engage in things that make me uncomfortable, that I know are good for my well-being or for people as a whole. I'm infusing positivity. So however I can, we all have that negative space we can get into. I'm very hyper aware of that space. And then I catch myself and I figure out how can I proceed forward with positivity. So again, I slow myself down and I try to really think about, is this a decision that is respectable, honorable? Does this maintain my dignity? Is this reminiscent of really my core values? So a lot of just checking in with myself and keeping that in the forefront of my mind on a daily basis. It's a practice every day.
Mm-hmm. In yoga, we call that's dhanara. It happens, right? Dhanara is trying to focus on something and knowing you're going to lose it and then going back to it.
Exactly.
And then you're going to lose it and then go back to it.
Exactly. Yes. So it's got to be very intentional. It's not, you can't just have that, thought and then expect that it's going to be there every day. It's something that you have to think about and make a concerted effort to have a part of your life.
To practice like working out or
100%. Yeah.
Who do you consider family, either bio or chosen? Like who's going to be, before this started, I said, who will visit you in the hospital? Who will put you in the ground? Who's that family and how do you invest in those relationships?
Yeah. So my children are my son and daughter who are turning 15 in May are family. My dad who lives in Israel is in the 70s. I'm very close to him. My mom passed away going on 3 years now. So she's not here. But I would say mainly when I think about family, it's really my immediate, like my dad, my sister. I have a sister who's 21, a much younger sister who I'm incredibly close with, and a few extended family relatives, but it's very small. I have a small family.
And then, not to put you on the spot, but do you want to identify any chosen family, people that are there all the
I
time?
have plenty of chosen family. I moved 3,000 miles away, right? I'm from New York City.
Yes.
And I live in California now, and I've had to create a chosen family here because holidays, right? My family is not here, and I'm not going to travel back east for every holiday. And so I have very close friends a small group actually, I would say less than 10 people that I try to really maintain a close relationship with. So I talk to them weekly. I try to see them. Now it's harder than ever, but I would make sure to see them at least once a month. So less than 10. I think I like quality relationships. So it's more than that. There's just not enough time in this life to invest in order to have that with more people. But if I could, I would.
And how do you think they became your core circle?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I love about being a host. I can ask impossible questions that I couldn't answer myself.
Yeah, it's a good one. And you're asking questions that I haven't been asked before, which is always fun because I've been interviewing for years, right? So people that can be honest, even if it's hard for them, and even if it's something they feel might hurt me, but they're willing to invest in our relationship enough to be honest, even when it's hard. People who are authentic aren't afraid to show their vulnerability, like to show those carbon spots I was talking about and know that like I'm still going to love them and be there. They don't have to be perfect all the time. And then people who I can laugh with. So everybody I'm really close with can just laugh at themselves and laugh at life and try to maintain positivity more often than not. Those are the people that I have in my little foxhole.
That sounds like a great recipe. It really does.
Thank you. It's working so far, I think.
And
they find me in the ass, but they love me nonetheless.
Well, that's part of it, right? That's part of the dance. When you have that kind of set of criteria, you're going to, there's going to be some pain.
There's going to be some pain.
At other places.
But it makes it interesting, right? And real. Because what's the human condition all about? It's about suffering, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of suffer together. And we're
that's what the Buddha says.
Yeah,
life
that's
is
what
suffering.
I believe. Yeah.
So let's close it out with some very lesbian stuff, if you don't.
Perfect.
I feel like my last job, I worked at West Hollywood City Hall. So I was able, my supervisor and my manager and my director were all lesbian. And we worked special events. So we would like stand around at events for 13 hours at a time. And we got to know each other.
I got lots of estrogen.
Well, yeah, and I got to see the pluses of managing as women and stuff. I never nobody ever shished my feelings.
Good.
And whatnot. So for all of them, I'm interested in your wing woman service. What is that still happening? Is that
no? Which I have bad news about right now.
Oh no!
Yeah,
okay.
It's not. It never quite fully got off the ground, and I think it was because I have so many ideas, and I'm an entrepreneur, right? I'm definitely a psychologist and a matchmaker, but there's a big part of me that's also an entrepreneur, and I have, like many entrepreneurs, a lot of ideas. So that was one that came from a lot of like women were asking about a service like that. So a lot of what I do actually is coming from women expressing the need for something, and I try to manifest it. So I didn't put in enough time, and I will resurrect it at some point. Right now I have too much going on in other areas for the company that I can't do it, but it's just, the concept is brilliant, right? Like a lot of us are single and we have friends that are partnered already that don't have a lot of free time or interest to go to singles events with us. And it's really hard to break in to an event on your own and make conversation with people solo. It's hard for most of us. And then especially for those of us who are introverted, it's incredibly hard. So I basically, it's like renting, it's renting a person who has great social skills and who's fun to go out to events with you for 3-4 hours and to help you mix and mingle and meet people.
That is awesome.
And there were plenty of women that wanted to do it. I thought I would have trouble finding wing women.
Oh.
And no, they were like emailing me, please add me to the list.
I was just thinking my former colleagues would be like, oh, sure, that they would totally do that. Absolutely. They were all in relationships, but two of them were married and one was in.
But it's perfect for somebody who's married. You get to be out, like you get to see all this stuff that's happening in the single life that that you don't have to deal with anymore.
And I also think that I don't know if that would work with men. I don't think it would. I think
why?
Because men are just so well, I don't know. It depends. It would have to be a very formalized, okay, guys, this is not about hooking up. This is about dating. And we'd have to have a whole like sit down
educational process. It's like there's an hour didactic required.
Yes. To understand what we're doing. It's not about sticking it in. It's more than that. Yeah. You want to like feel this. We want to feel this. Yeah.
You can say that. I can't.
Oh, I know. That's why I'm saying it.
I would not dare. But yes.
Oh, okay.
I agree.
Yeah. You don't. Yeah. Just don't disagree. That's all. So could I ask you some questions from my from Lesley? Lesley asks, who is the most difficult kind of lesbian to match?
I would say somebody who's very, very pretty rigid. Somebody who's rigid, who has a huge laundry list of must-haves and deal breakers, because no one's good enough for them. Yeah. So somebody who has unrealistic expectations and is pretty rigid. The more flexible and fluid we can be, and the more we can recognize that we're all imperfect, the greater chance you'll have to finding somebody and being in a relationship.
I'm just laughing because that's what a lot of hookup apps and stuff look like, and all these lists.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. It's like it keeps you single. It guarantees your singlehood. So make sure to have, the longer the list is, the longer you're going to be single.
I love that. That's like my dad, Bill Gurley, says stuff like that. You can either have a list or you can have a relationship.
Exactly. As long as you know that, just know that and you're fine.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, next question. What aspects of a match make them successful in the long run? What's the magic bullet, I guess?
Communication, patience, and commitment. If you are you're committed to that relationship, you're willing to do the work on that relationship, you're willing to communicate when things come up, right? And work through it, and recognizing that we're all works in progress, that's a recipe for success. Mm-hmm. One of my clients will say, I don't ever leave the court. Like right there, she's in it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Always being open and curious. No matter what's happening.
Yes. And committed to the process. It's what I hear a lot about is that people, when it gets difficult, they're out. They're ready to go back on the app and start swiping again because it's easier.
Because, and that's the fantasy we've all been told.
Yes.
Who's that singer who says, I've been poisoned by these fairy tales? But we're all raised on these fairy tales that it's difficult to get at the beginning, and then you get together and everything's great. Exactly. When it's just the reverse of that.
We can thank Disney for that. Thanks, Disney.
Yeah, Disney's poisoned our minds. And this sounds like the same answer, but what do you need from your clients in order to make successful matches?
I need them to be patient, right? I need them to be open. I need them to be realistic. So somebody who is overweight that wants to be with somebody who's, 5'11" and size 4 or 6 and works out, 6 days a week. That to me blows my mind. Why would somebody who's not taking good care of themselves think that somebody who is in top-notch shape want to be with them?
Oh, well, I'm not going to touch that.
Okay. I'll say it. I will say it because I hear it and I need to put it out there. We need to be honest with ourselves about what we have to offer, and we need to be realistic about who would want to be with us.
Okay.
Given what we have to offer. So Mike, does that answer your question?
Yes, that honesty just keeps coming up over and over and over again.
With ourselves and others.
Yeah.
Yes. So to lie on your dating app and put photos of yourself that aren't even accurate, that don't accurately reflect the way you look, you're setting yourself up for rejection. Stop doing it.
Just be you. Be that interesting person we were talking about. You have this fascinating story.
Yes.
of growth.
Let people see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to paraphrase a couple of these. Is there a difference in the matchmaking between lesbians and I'll just have like three, gay people, lesbians, and straight people. And we know everything is completely gray. It's all one thing. We're just picking out three dots on that line, right?
Yes. So let me see if I can answer this. So with lesbians, what really, really is important that isn't important in other, with heterosexual matchmaking is the nuance of the masculinity and femininity spectrum. So the way I use a Likert scale. So 10 is high femme, 5 is androgynous, 1 is stone butch. I ask women to tell me where they fall on the scale and give me a range because we can't bucket, right? We can't bucket ourselves perfectly. Some days I look like I'm androgynous. Some days I look like I'm high femme. Like what, you know what I mean? So I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm a 7 on the scale or a 6-7, right? So I think for lesbians, that's really important. When somebody's attracted to more masculine women, it matters. I can't introduce them to a femme and expect them to actually be attracted to one another. It's not going to happen. Whereas in the straight world, a guy's like, just introduce me to a beautiful woman. He's not
However
saying
she shows up as long as she's beautiful.
Right? Make sure she's beautiful and make sure she's androgynous. No, that's not going to happen. They're not asking for that.
Yeah.
And then with gay men, and granted, initially when I first started Little Gay Book, I worked with gay men and lesbians. I forgot to mention that.
Okay.
But when I realized that, I'm just going to say, you touched on the reason why I did not continue taking on, gay men as clients. It was just too hard.
I'm open to that. You can't hurt my feelings with that.
Okay.
I know us,
it was too hard. And I have so much love for your community, 100%, but I'm just going to speak the truth. It was too hard for me as a matchmaker to match for monogamy. So I think also, like lesbians, gay men, they care about, you guys have different terms, right? And I don't know them all and I would butcher them if I even tried, but certain type, where do they fall? Like more masculine, more
mask
feminine.
femme is basically how that goes. Yeah.
So it's similar.
Yeah.
I would use the scale. Even when I had matchmaking clients that were gay men, I was using the same scale. So that's the main difference, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. From my 54 years deep in culture, I would agree with you.
Thanks for that. I get scared to offend or have anybody think that I'm not.
No. That's so much about what, I'm just really hoping this podcast works because I it's about heart-centered connection between gay men. And people are like, What do you mean?
Good. Yeah.
That means that that if Corona wasn't happening right now, be in a very open relationships. Me and almost all of my core chosen family is very open and fluid as far as when it comes to sex. And I would teach naked yoga classes and whatnot. And everybody would agree that the hardest part of the class is I would have people come up and they would touch the person's heart with their hand and look into their eyes.
Yeah, because it's so intimate.
For a minute. And that was harder than anything else in the whole class. They could do anything sexually with that person. A lot easier than just look into their eyes and say, I see you.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's why I love what you're doing. And I agree with you. What I'm trying to say is that's the way we built. If we don't start with honesty, if we're not honest that, yes, I'm like triggered 90% of like why I want to hook up with you is physical. And then it's conscious. It takes practice, like you were saying, to like get down and what do I really want? What I really want is connection. Yes. What I really want is love.
Yes.
What I really want is support.
We all want that.
Yeah. But that's vulnerable. And especially men are taught, don't be vulnerable. Then you're not a man. You're not valuable.
Yeah. And you're not strong. And it's a lot of undoing programming that we've had our whole lives.
Yeah. Yeah. So
you're going to help. Hopefully you're going to help lots of men.
Well, you're going to help by just showing especially when it comes to queerness. I know that you're transitioning to like a broader thing, but it's honoring who we are and celebrating who we are as opposed to tolerating who we are. Yes. We need to stop tolerating who we are. We need to start celebrating who we are.
I agree. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And then we can live in our genius like you're
Yes.
doing. And you, by taking the risk of living in your genius, are so much more valuable to the world than
Aw.
seeing just one client at a time. And,
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. It's a
yeah.
calling, right? It's pulling me further. Like I said, I just listen. I'm just getting pulled now to work with just people, not, exclusively
Yeah.
women.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I
I've noticed
appreciate
that
that. Thank
too.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. You're welcome. You're welcome. And thank you for doing the work. Is there anything else that I didn't touch that, you would like to?
One day when I do my podcast again, when I have time, I'm going to have you as a guest because there's so many things I wanted to ask you, but I didn't want to take over the interview. So just be ready. I'm coming for you.
Awesome. I'm ready. I'm ready. I want you to know so just probably 10 minutes of doing research on you, I'm like, oh my God, if reincarnation is real, if I come back as a lesbian, I want to come back like Dr. Frankie.
Oh my God.
I'm
Oh,
totally you, except for like I'm a total gay man. I'm very, very gay, and I very much identify with my gender. But I've
I love
so
it.
relate to you, right down to the party. Like my partner that I have now, we met at an event. You guys were talking about motorcycle fairings, which is
Yes.
funny. But we were both in government, and I don't know if you had the same repelling effect that we did on the rest of the party. But we were talking about what our thing was.
Yes.
Just like you guys are talking about your thing, and it sounds like
Exactly.
it really, really connected.
It really connected. It's just that one thing that you can connect on is what can lead, right? It's what leads us to the next. Like I was
Yeah,
hooked at that point. I'm like, oh, she rides bikes and I'm wanting to get a bike right now. It was like an instant. And she has something to tell me about it. And she's so cute.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
The
well,
hook.
then I have like a kind of another personal question. Maybe you can help me with.
Yeah.
It's about I'm in a business relationship with my ex-husband. This studio
Not
is
easy.
in his condo where I used to live, and we decided what to do with this condo during our divorce. But we're still in a relationship because that's possible.
Yeah.
But you're also like you were raising kids with your
Yes.
partner, right? And
Yes.
do you have any advice on navigating these a relationship with your ex when you have an invested other? Ours we can get rid of. You can yours. You're going to have
No.
yours no matter what. But
It's very, very hard, especially if you have different communication styles and if, people move on, right? They repartner, like my ex is remarried, has a baby, but she has a new family. So there are more dynamics, right? More people to navigate. So what I would say is it's in my kid's best interest to maintain a good relationship with my ex.
mhm.
And while I don't always like the choices that she makes or the things that she does, I try to see it from her perspective as much as I can and know that there's not one way to deal with the situation. And my goal is to just be as caring and protective for create a very safe space for my kids to thrive. And it's not about my feelings and it's not about how I think things should be done. It's about what is going to keep my kids thriving.
What's good for the kids?
Exactly.
You can bounce everything off of.
Yeah. You have to suspend your bullshit. You just have to, right, suspend your stuff that you get caught up in, that you want things done a certain way, or you don't understand why they would choose to, you know what I mean? Like all that stuff it's like get quiet again and figure out how do I help support these two beings that I put on this earth that are my responsibility. And that's what matters. So that's how I do it. It's hard. It's very hard.
It
But
sounds like you pull on your intuition again there.
again, I'm telling you, it's with me. It's my best friend.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I could talk to you forever. I want to thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming here and or zooming here. And I knew I would love meeting you, but you're so awesome. And I love the work that you're doing. I love who you're doing it with. I love how open and honest and authentic you are. You make me really proud to be part of the LGBT community. You're a perfect example of and you're being you, and you're blessing other people's ability to couple, which is hard. And even though that's like one of the hardest things to do right now, especially with all the technology and all the chaos and all the distractions. And you're doing it, and it must be a calling. It sounds really, really, really hard.
Oh, anyway. Mike, thank you for everything. And I'm honored to be here, to have met you. Next time I'm in WeHo, I'm gonna look you up and
absolutely
hang in there.
Well, thank you. You hang in there too. You and your family and your 16-year-old fur baby.
Exactly. We will.
Okay.
Yes, for sure. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that, my friends, is Dr. Frankie Bashan. Dr. Frankie is a great example of tuning into her intuition to find out what living in her genius looks like and finding joy as a result. Remember, you can find Dr. Frankie on Instagram at Dr. Frankie Bashan, on Facebook at Frankie Bashan, and at Little Gay Book, on YouTube at Little Gay Book, or her website, just simply drfrankie.com. That's drfrankie.com, and you can find all of that in our show notes. Have an excellent day. Thanks for listening to the show, my friend. Now stay connected by subscribing to GerleMen podcast and sharing with your friends on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or anywhere else podcasts can be found. Visit the webpage at GerleMen.com, sign up for the newsletter, and find more details about each episode. Let's make this a conversation, because I'd really like to hear from you. Join us on Facebook at GerleMen. Submit your questions, suggest topics, or just chat with your brothers. Want to add your own 2 cents? Use the voice memo feature on your smartphone. Ask a question or say anything. We just might play it on the podcast. Email the file to mike@gerlemen.com. Until next time.